morning, and thank you for joining us. Today we have Tim Daniels, President and Director of Boron One, here to talk about this morning's news. The company released news of advancement of their Piskanja Boron Project licensing process, and he's going to discuss more of that in details. Hi, Tim.
Hello.
How are you doing?
On my side, but sorry about that. I'm fine. Okay. I'm fine. How are you today, Ashley?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for joining us. And I'm sure you're extremely busy, so that's good news. That's a positive problem, right?
It is, absolutely. It's a high-class problem to have, being busy. So I'm happy.
So the company had some exciting news today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think what I'd like to do is, for those who might be on the call today that might be new to us, let me spend 5 or 10 minutes first just talking generally about the company and why people should be excited about it. And that will make today's news even more meaningful to them. So again, I'm Tim Daniels. I'm President, CEO of Boron One. And as our name suggests, we are a boron company. What is boron and why should you be interested in it? Boron is probably the one industrial mineral or quasi-metal that each of us use every single day of our life, even though most of us know very little or nothing about it. In fact, modern life as we know it would be substantially different were it not for boron all around us. So for example, from the ceramic tiles under our feet, to the fiberglass insulation in our walls, to the fiber optic cable running this feed today, to the screens we're all looking into, whether it's a TV screen, a phone screen, all uses boron. The solar panels on our roof, our vehicles, the roll cages in our cars are all made out of a boron steel, which is about 4 times stronger than regular steel, et cetera, et cetera. It's in the food we eat. It's in our rechargeable batteries. Modern life would be substantially different if it wasn't for boron. So if boron is so important, why don't we hear more about it? Well, the reason for it is because there's literally a half dozen different boron mines in the entire world. So it's a true oligopoly. It's very much a controlled mineral. And for that reason, we just don't hear about it. You can't open your Kitco app and get the latest quote on boron. It's not a quoted material. It's not like gold or oil or most other commodities. Every boron contract is a negotiated contract between the buyer and the seller. So on one side of the ledger, you literally have one handful of suppliers in the entire world. On the other side, though, there's literally hundreds and hundreds of companies that use boron for hundreds and hundreds of products that we all use every day. So the scales are not balanced. And that's a very good situation for a new player in the market like us. The one thing that's changed that dynamic even further to the benefit of the producers is this buzzword that we've all heard about and that we will be hearing about for the next several decades to come. And that's decarbonization or getting off fossil fuels. And whatever method that is, whether we're talking about wind turbines or solar panels or nuclear energy, rechargeable batteries, having more energy efficient homes, getting better and better crop yields, et cetera, et cetera. All these things are extremely, extremely urgent and important for the survival of mankind if we're going to, decarbonize planet Earth and get off the fossil fuels. Well, guess what? Every one of those things that I just mentioned can only happen because of boron. Boron plays as an important role for decarbonizing planet Earth as any other substance on Earth possibly could. So that's the game changer. So historically, you had these users that were using boron for several hundreds of everyday industrial products that we all use. But all of a sudden, because of decarbonization, the demand for boron is growing 4 to 10 times its historic levels. And so guess what that's also doing to prices? It's putting them through the roof. But unlike other commodities where as demand goes up and prices go up, supply goes up with it because more production comes on stream. Well, with boron, that's just not possible because there is no new boron plays out there in the world, with the exception of a very small handful, us being front and center. So boron is absolutely essential to modern life. It's absolutely essential to decarbonization of planet Earth. It's on every country's critical materials list, whether you're talking about North America, Europe, Asia. Everyone has recognized that boron is one of these materials that we all really, really need. And there's a very small handful of suppliers, and therefore it's a critical material. Some areas have gone even a step further. So, for example, this year in the European Union, they not only have included boron on their critical materials list, and they've had it there for the last half dozen years or so, but this year they took the extra step where they went to the big consumers of boron in Europe. Think about glass companies, fiberglass companies, pharmaceutical companies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the EU has said to those companies now, by law, they have to diversify their supply chains of these critical materials. So with a lot of critical materials, like lithium, for example, there's literally hundreds of different suppliers of lithium in the world. So for somebody who needs lithium in their processes, can you diversify your supply chain? Absolutely, because there are hundreds of suppliers of lithium in the world. For boron in Europe, guess how many suppliers there are? One supplier. And so all the companies out there who are using millions and millions and millions of dollars worth of boron each year in Europe, today they're getting it from one supplier and one supplier only, and that's the Turkish government. And so they're scrambling to find alternative suppliers, and it doesn't exist. So is there room for a new player in the market like us? Yeah, you bet. There's a huge gaping and growing hole in the boron market for a new player like us. So that's the really exciting news generally if you're talking about boron. Specifically about our deposit. We've had this deposit for a number of years. We've been taking it through the exploration cycle. We finished that, which is great news. And we're now going into the mine development cycle, or actually we've been in the mine development cycle for the last couple of years. In the mine development cycle, there's a couple critical steps. The first step we finished last year. That is called the certification of the reserve. And that is a resource or reserve calculation done to mining industry standards. And it gets submitted and vetted and approved by an independent committee. And that process took us about 8 months to come out the other side and get approved. And that was a really big deal because it is a complicated step. Our geological elaborate that was submitted for the purpose of getting our certificate of reserves was a couple thousand pages of documentation and calculation. So it's a sizable document to say the least, and it goes through very detailed vetting, which takes months and months and months. Well, we came out the other side and we were approved, and that puts us to the next step in the process, which is called the approval of the exploitation field. Now, to get your approval for your exploitation field, which is the second of 3 steps and a really critical step, because at this step, what it does is it gives the company that's been approved for the exploitation field the exclusive rights to develop and exploit that deposit. In other words, you now have the exclusive rights to mine that that deposit. So it's a really, really big step. And to get that approval, you have to submit, amongst a number of documents, the single most important document and the biggest, most complex document is a feasibility study done to Serbian Mining Ministry standards. We've completed that, and actually we completed that a couple months back, and we've had that sitting on our shelf, ready to go with most of the other documents. We were waiting for one last approval from one ministerial department of the government. We finally received that last week. So this week, our package went in for our application for the exploitation field. Again, really, really big deal, because the approval of that gives us exclusive rights to mine the deposit and is the second step in the process. It's a bit of a fool's game to try to, predict how long approval processes are going to take when you're dealing with any government. The Serbian government is no different. What we're being told, however, is that the process is substantially streamlined from the first process that we went through last year for the certification of the resource. Whereas that took many, many months and is vetted by an outside commission that's made up of local mining experts from within the country. In this case, for the exploitation field approval, that's done just internally within the mining ministry, and it's more of a check the box process rather than a deep dive vetting that's the first level of due diligence that we have to go through with the certification of the reserves. So we're being told that we should expect that it shouldn't take more than a couple of months to come out the other side. And so we're on standby waiting for that to happen. And we would expect to be in a position, let's say by end of the summer into the fall, to have that approval. Fingers crossed. We'll see if the prognostications that we've heard of it being a couple-month process makes sense. In the meanwhile, there's a lot of other work that we are going to be doing. So we're not just sitting back twiddling our thumbs, waiting for that approval to come through. The third and final step in the licensing process is the approval of the actual mine designs, the blueprints of the mining operation and your surface circuits. And so we have started that whole process now, and which involves vetting and retaining engineering groups that will do the actual mine designs for us. At the same time we're doing that, we are continuing our development of relationships with potential partners, both offtake partners, both companies that have a large appetite and need for our products long term. And again, remember what I mentioned, a few minutes earlier, whereas, companies out of Europe, which is our low-hanging fruit, sweet spot market, given that, Serbia is right there on the EU's doorstep and is actually in the process for EU membership, and has for the last decade had preferred member trading status as if it is a full member of the EU. So products today and for the last decade coming out of Serbia are treated as if they're coming from a full EU membership country. So there's no taxes or duties or tariffs or restrictions on flow of goods from Serbia into the EU today. And of course, as I mentioned, Serbia is on the path for membership of the EU. And so for us, partnerships with companies in the EU who have this tremendous appetite for boron going forward. And today, They are 100% relying on one supplier, which is the Turkish government, and they don't like to be in that position. Number one, they don't like it, but number two, they've been legislated by the European Commission where they have to find alternative supply chains for all their critical materials. So we are having, some very productive conversations with companies that have a very large appetite and would be very attracted to the possibility of, a long-term relationship with us to have, boron supply that they need for the next few decades. So we are continuing to develop our relationships with potential off-takers and with strategic partners, and starting the process of sourcing and discussing with various engineering groups for the design and construction of our mining and processing facilities. So while we're waiting for the approval from the Mining Ministry for our exploitation field, we've got lots of work to keep us busy for the next couple of months. And then, as I said, that takes us into the third and final step of the licensing process, which is the submission of our actual mine designs and blueprints to the government for approval, and then we're allowed to actually build the mine and go into production from that point forward. So, we certainly are looking at very concrete steps and timelines in front of us as to what we need to accomplish, how we're going to accomplish it, et cetera, et cetera. So we're very excited what the future looks like for us over the next period of time. And so this news today, marks a major milestone for us as a company as we move through that whole licensing process with the Serbian authorities. So that's in a nutshell where we're at here today, Ashley.
That's great, Tim. Thank you so much for going over that and explaining it. I know sometimes it's hard for people to understand the process and which steps the company is taking and how it all falls in line with a timeline and such. So we really appreciate you coming on with everything you have going on and making time for your shareholders and audience in general. We do have a few questions in the question and answer section. So the first one is, thanks for this, Tim. Can you share an accurate timeline, if you have one, for shareholders now that this step in the process has been taken?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, so with regards to this particular step now, we've passed it off, to the government, and now it's up to them. I'm sorry, I refer to the government. I do mean the mining ministry within the government, not the government in general. And so now it's up to the mining ministry to do their vetting. And as I said, we're being told that it's a couple month process, quote unquote. What that means in reality, we don't know, because obviously this is a new step for us. And frankly, there hasn't been that many companies, go through this process since the changes in the mining laws, some years back. And so it is a little bit of new territory, certainly for us. So I'll set that to the side and just go with what we've been told, which is it's a quote unquote couple month process. But beyond that, the next steps in the process, we've set aside about a 12-month period in which we believe that we can complete our next work so that we can submit for our next approval. So that includes completing a little bit of work on the ground that the engineers are going to want to do. Not exploration work. This is mine development related work. Some, pilot testing, some drilling of alignment holes where certain of mining infrastructure will go, et cetera, et cetera. But the two most time-consuming pieces of this next step are, number one, the completion of the environmental impact assessment itself, which is better than half done right now, but there are some steps in that environmental assessment that take several months to complete. So that's one pacing item over the next 12 months. The other and biggest single one is the development of the blueprints for the mine design itself. And we are in some discussion with some potential engineering firms. We haven't retained anyone yet to do that work. And they certainly, all the indications are that 12 months is more than enough time, assuming we've got all the data to provide to them to do the work that they need to do. So we've earmarked, the next 12 months as the rough timeline in which to finish the work that we need to do to submit for our final approval, which is the approval to actually build the mine. Our engineers' best guess at this point in time for the actual construction of the mine is somewhere between about an 18 to 24 month period for the actual mine construction. And they're comfortable that that's a realistic time frame. Possibly it could be done a little bit quicker, or possibly could take a little bit longer. A lot of it, some of the supply chains these days, since the pandemic, supplies of certain materials like the specialized steel that's used for reinforcement in underground mining, et cetera, is taking longer to get delivery of these days than it was prior to the pandemic and so on. So there's some of those sorts of pacing items that are beyond our control that could, stretch out some of the timelines. But generally speaking, if you wanted to just, kind of have a good, back of the napkin guesstimate as to what our timelines look like from this point forward, about 12 months to get to the point where we can commence construction, and then about 24 months to take us through and have a going concern mining operation. So those
exciting. You've got an exciting year ahead.
Absolutely.
Okay, great update, Tim, and great job on the news today. How excited are you, and how excited should your shareholders be?
I think really, really excited. I'm very excited. Not specifically for this step. I mean, yes, this is a big deal for us, but it is completely anticipated, and I've already been looking beyond this step for the last many months. I know that a lot of our shareholders, rightfully so, have been focused on us getting to this point, to the point where our feasibility study is now in the hands of the Mining Ministry, and we're going through that approval. And you should be excited about that because it is a big deal, and it is a major milestone forward in our development process. But for me personally, as I said, we've actually had our paperwork done, including this feasibility study and the environmental impact synopsis and everything else that we could do. We've had that done for the last few months. So for the last couple of months, we've already been working forward on the next step in the process. So yes, I'm excited by this, but I'm already well ahead looking and working on the next development steps. And again, why should you be excited? So I keep saying, well, this is exciting. Exciting because, again, we don't get a going concern mining operation without us going through these steps. And that's not unlike any other country in the world. These steps that we're going through are not dissimilar from the same sort of licensing process that you would experience regardless of where you're operating. And in fact, my experience is that the Serbian process is much quicker than what you'll find almost anywhere in Canada, for example, if you're making that comparison. But looking ahead, I mean, obviously, all these are just steps along the path, and the end result is a going concern mining operation. And why should we all be excited about that? Well, if you remember, those who have been following us for a while, if you go back to the numbers that we presented in our PEA, as an example, we have the ability to produce for nearly 2 decades based on the material that we have drilled out today, and the deposit remains open in 2 directions. So we believe there's a very good opportunity to expand that to maybe 3 decades or more. And we can produce at a rate that can throw off in the neighborhood of about $125 million of revenue per year for a couple of decades. Those are big dollars. Those are not just big dollars for a little company like Boron One, with a $10 million market cap. Those are big numbers for any company. And our anticipated operating margins are very good, as exciting, where we were looking at internal rates of return above 65%, operating margins near 70%, and so on. So the boron, again, because of its scarcity, because there's so few producers out there, and because it's in such big demand from hundreds of companies, the profit margins are very, very big. It's a profitable business to be in. So why should we all be excited? Not specifically because we submitted a document today. We should be all excited because by submitting this document today, it gets us one big step closer to these numbers that I was just talking about now, 125 million a year in revenue, et cetera, et cetera. So that's, the ultimate prize that we should all be, continuing to focus our attention on. And that's what keeps me excited about all this, this project for all these years.
Awesome. Hi, Tim. Are there numerous options for financial partners?
There are. And I must say that they're growing. Maybe by the day is a hyperbole, but they're growing. There are more and more companies interested in partnering with us for the reasons that I said. Boron is very scarce. Boron is very profitable. There's very large companies who have a huge appetite for boron, and they are being legislated. Their government is telling them that they must, by law, have an alternative supply chain of boron. And so these companies are now looking, well, where can we find a long-term partnership in boron? Well, there's 2 big players in the industry today that have about 75% market share. One is the government of Turkey. The other is Rio Tinto, the world's biggest mining companies. Are either of those 2 players interested in partnering their boron with anybody? No. The rest of the market is made up by a handful of producers, mostly out of South America. Most of them are fairly small scale. That's not really attractive. So for these companies that are looking to develop a strategic partnership where they can vertically integrate their supply chain into a supplier and secure the boron that they're going to need for the next 20 years, 30 years, we're the only game in town. And so, yes, we have some good opportunities that have opened up for us. I can tell you there's companies today that are actively interested in us that 5 years ago, when we'd have conversations with them, they'd kind of shrug and say, yeah, we have no problem getting all the boron that we need. That's changed. The whole world has changed because of decarbonization, because everybody has found out how fragile supply chains in the world actually are, because all these new uses for boron, because it's on every country's critical materials list now. All of a sudden, these same companies that 5 years ago were shrugging, saying, sure, we'll talk to you when you get your mine built and maybe we'll buy a little boron from you. Those same companies today are actively coming to us saying, let's talk, let's sit down, let's form long-term strategic partnerships. So we have opportunities today for strategic partnerships that that are only available to us because the dynamics of the boron market have swung in the favor of a producer like us so dramatically in the last couple of years. So it's a fun place to be, for sure.
Awesome. So does the Piskanja deposit host any accessory minerals? Are there any deleterious elements in boron deposits?
In boron deposits in general, yes. So for example, one of the big advantages that we've got, so our quick little lesson for everyone out there, there's different types of boron. Boron is never found in nature standing alone. In other words, B, the element is called B. You never find B. You always find boron hosted in other materials. And the most common material it's hosted with is either calcium or sodium. All the boron found in the Americas, so that Rio Tinto in California and the half dozen or so small deposits in South America, are all primarily sodium deposits. And they have their particular uses. What they have in Turkey, though, is very different. It's a calcium deposit, a calcium borite deposit. And that has its particular uses. For example, everybody, the screen you're looking into right now, whether it's a telephone or a monitor, the glass on it is called a borosilicate glass, which is made out of about 12 to 15% boron. The only type of boron that you can use to make that glass is the calcium boron. Today, the only supplier of that is Turkey, the only supplier. Well, we've got the same type of boron. So all of a sudden, all these hundreds of companies that need calcium-based boron, they finally have an alternative supplier in us. But getting back to the deleterious materials, one problem with the calcium-based boron coming out of Turkey is that it's very high in arsenic content. So the companies that are importing the boron to use to make the borosilicate glass, as an example, or fiberglass, or whatever it is they're making, one of the byproducts that they've got is arsenic, a high concentration of arsenic, which has to be disposed of in hazardous waste dumps, which is very costly. And the only reason why the EU is even allowing it is because boron is so much in demand. Otherwise, they wouldn't even allow that to come in. The good news, we don't have any arsenic in ours. In terms of other deleterious materials, we've had a number of potential users, off-takers, test our boron, and they've looked at the content of the sodium and the iron and the lead and the arsenic and so on. And right across the board, they come back and shrug and say, yeah, you have a few trace elements here and there of various things, nothing in there that is bothersome to our process. So no particular off-taker has come to us saying, yeah, we've got a problem with your boron because you have too much arsenic or you have too much iron or whatever. So no, our material appears to be very, very clean if you're talking about negative materials. On the other side, are there any other positive materials in our boron? Again, the answer is no. Oftentimes, boron is associated with lithium, which is very close to it on the periodic table. So it's not uncommon to find boron and lithium together. In our deposit, there is no lithium, nor are there any other materials that are of value, just trace elements. So no, this is just a pure boron play, which again is highly irregular.
That's excellent. So that's it for the questions and I think your presentation. Thank you so much for joining us, Tim. If you have any closing remarks or want to direct the audience on where they can best reach you, and then we can end things.
Yeah, and so as always, if have any questions, just please go to our website. It certainly will answer a lot of your questions, but it'll also give you our contact information, and that's just boron1.com. So BORONONE.com, and from there you can reach us and or leave messages for us, and we'd be happy to hear from you. And I hope everybody is happy to see us advancing along the way, and I think this is a start of a stream of some good news coming out for us. So it's exciting times for us.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tim.
Thanks for having me, Ashley.